Hello and welcome to Unsportsmanlike Conduct, the show where two British brothers talk all things NFL. I'm your host, Dom Corbs, and I'm joined with my co-host, Nick Corbs again. And Nick, TikTok got banned for 24 hours. I thought my career was up in flames, but we're back, baby.
Don't forget to follow at Dom Corbs NFL. Never embarrass the shameless plug on this podcast.
We are not. If anything, I've been plugging the other way around. I'm plugging this YouTube. If you're listening, if you're a new listener, make sure you're subscribed. If you are a new listener, welcome. You're about to hear the best takes you'll ever hear about the Divisional Round preview, which is what me and Nu are talking about today. We're going to go through every game and give a take for every team from every game. We're going to start, Nu, with the Texans versus the Chiefs. I've got a general one, not about either team, but one which I do want to just kind of kick off this discussion with. And also for the listeners, we don't let each other know what we're going to be talking about. This is completely kind of not unplanned from our end, but we don't kind of collaborate on these things. So if we do end up saying the same thing, it's a happy coincidence. But I do want to talk about just general NFL officiating here, I think.
Yeah.
Because there obviously isn't match fixing. I'm not wearing my tinfoil hat and those people that are, the Chiefs are paying the refs and all this malarkey. But I do think that narrative exists because NFL officiating is at best inconsistent and at worst just bad, I would say. And I do think the Mahomes referee narrative is kind of overblown, but there is, especially in that Texans game, and I'm a Texans fan for full clarity here, but that, like, roughing the part, the Will Anderson one, fine, fair enough. It was helmet to, like, lower face mask. I can see that, right? Like, I wasn't that aggrieved by it. But the other one, when, if anything, the two Texans players hit each other more than they hit Mahomes, what are we doing here? Genuinely, what are we doing? And what annoys me the most, Nu, and this is where I'd like you to come in, I hated seeing Patrick Mahomes run to the sideline, slow down, try and look for contact to draw a flag, because it's dangerous. Like, those rules, the quarterback protection rules, are there to protect quarterbacks. But when quarterbacks like Mahomes are abusing it, essentially for their own personal gain and for their team's game, if the NFL removes it, it's because of idiots like him, frankly. Like, you can't abuse something that's there for your safety. I find that absolutely insane. If you get, 5 more yards in a first down? I hated seeing that.
Yeah, Dom, he was actually flopping. And I don't think that word is used that much in the NFL. You see a lot in basketball and obviously a lot in football, a lot in soccer. But I think that's the way that is going for quarterbacks. It's in your best interest to get hit as close to the sideline as possible. And Patrick Mahomes would literally slow down, look over his shoulder, throw his toys out of the pram. I think it's ridiculous, Dom. And also, I thought that the officiating was also banned in the Bills game. Most notably, there was the holding call on number 73, isn't it? The right tackle for the Bills. And it was just a perfect...
Dawkins.
Yeah, Dawkins, sorry, thank you. It was just a perfect technique block. I just think...
Oh my God, yeah. When he clubs the hands down.
Like, you don't even need to know the rules of the NFL to know that's not holding, because he doesn't hold him. But obviously, sorry, just to speak more about quarterbacks specifically, I saw that's a bit off topic. I completely agree.
No, that's right.
I completely agree.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I completely forgot about the Dawkins hold. Like, that was crazy. Like, literally, perfect technique. Like, and there was another like ghost face mask call somewhere where it was a completely fine tackle. Like, I get there's an element of that this kind of happens every week, and because of how the NFL schedule works and all the games are going on at the same time, if this happens in Colts, Jets, no one cares, right? Because no one's watching it. Like, this has all eyes on it. But even more so, that it's important to make sure that this is okay. Like, we had that ridiculous with the ghost face mask call. They weren't allowed to review it. Like, technically, by the rules of the game, if they throw a flag, they can then get New York to look at it, I believe, but not the other way around. It's just like, they have so many cameras. It's so behind any other sport in the world. Tennis, cricket, football, like, you name it. The NFL is decades behind in terms of like extra officiating help. Having VAR, having Sky Judge, having third umpire. I don't know what the hell they want to call it in the NFL, but the lack of it, I think, is embarrassing for the league.
Yeah, Dom, there's so much money, so much funding. There's no reason why officials should be this bad and why technology isn't helping officials more. The fact that they still use chains is still ridiculous. The fact that there's one guy who randomly spots a ball in a random location is ridiculous. There's all things that money and technology could fix. And
yeah, I agree.
They just choose not to.
I agree.
And yeah, Dom, I think the solution with Patrick Mahomes, slowing down is almost similar to the Kenny Pickett fake slide situation that happened a couple of years back. Those don't know, Kenny Pickett, who's currently the backup quarterback for the Eagles, when he was with Pittsburgh in college, running, pretended to slide, ended up scoring. That's got to be the same thing. If you're going to give yourself up to go out of bounds, you've got to go out of bounds. You can't try and draw the hit. I think if you try to draw the hit, you should be able to get hit. And I think if that's the rules, I think it would eliminate it from the game and hopefully better officiating.
It should just be a penalty. It should just straight up be a penalty. Like you shouldn't be allowed, if you're running out of bounds, to slow down. It's as simple as that. Like, I get there's going to be a degree of subjectivity with all these rules, but fundamentally, if you're running to the sideline, you need to get out of bounds because that's how you're protecting yourself. You're a runner at that point. You're out of the pocket. Anyway, Nu, let's move on. What's your take then from the Texans-Chiefs game, specifically the Texans?
You can't win a game with 8 sacks. And that's what I'd have to say. When you get sacked 8 times, you're never going to win. And I think the Texans, my overall take, are a lot further away from the Super Bowl than I think Texans fans like yourself, Dom, like to think. I think that offensive line is a real fundamental problem to that team. I think Will Anderson is a lovely piece. Derek Stingley, great piece. I think there's real potential and future for that defense. But you've got aging, injured wide receivers, in Stephon Diggs. Tank Dell, obviously, unfortunately injured. Nico Collins missed some time with an injury. Joe Mixon's an aging player. And CJ Stroud, I think, is still, a better quarterback in the league. I think he's still top 15. I don't think that's a problem at all. But there's some real changes need to be made to that O-line, Dom. And real fundamental changes need to be made to that offense, which is not a simple fix. It's not a year-long thing which they can bounce back from. Is it Bobby Slowick? Is it the GM? I'm not sure. But the Texans really need to reconsider their team.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, Nu. I completely agree with you. Like, they had 8 sacks, the Chiefs, as you said, and 22 pressures. And CJ Stroud actually, I think, played a pretty good game. I'm all here for this more mobile version of CJ Stroud, which is almost like evolution at its finest, right? Like, there's an external pressure on him, which is that he's always under pressure, and he has to evolve and adapt to try and offset that as best he can. He's never going to be an actual dual threat quarterback. He's got some wiggle to him though, and I like to see him use that. But what my take, first of all, I completely agree with you. The offensive line is a massive problem. I mean, our draft needs now are as long as my forearm, really. Like, we need offensive line, we need protection for CJ Stroud, we need interior offensive line, we need offensive line, we need a center. Do you know what I mean? Like, that's the list. And then you're right. Tank Dell, I think, is going to miss most of next year. I hope he can play again, but that kind of injury is seriously verging on, in the modern era, you don't really get, thankfully, proper career-ending injuries. But that's about as close as I think we can really come without it being like an Alex Smith kind of level of an injury.
Yeah, especially with someone who relies on Twitch so much, Dom. It is really a cause of concern.
Yeah, it is. And yeah, you're right. Stephon Diggs, he was on a 1-year contract. Why we reworked his contract when we traded for him was beyond me. And yeah, we need offensive line. We need a new running back to, maybe go alongside Joe Mixon. And we need some wide receivers. And there's just not really enough picks to go around or enough money, really. Like, you're right. I love the defense. I think Derek Stingley is one of the best young corners in the league. I think Kamari Lassiter in the second round was an absolute steal. He's been so good opposite Stingley as literally a great cornerback too. Do you know what I mean? He's never going to be like a 1, but as a compliment to Stingley, he's fantastic. And yeah, you're right. Will Anderson, brilliant as well. But it's the offense. And what I said is, you need to have a perfect game to beat the Chiefs. And we didn't. With the offensive line, as you've pointed out, was horrible. Fairbairn missed 2 kicks for a total of 4 points. Yeah. Xavier Hutchinson is playing a significant role. I like Xavier Hutchinson, don't get me wrong, Iowa State, big up. But he can't, in a playoff game against the Chiefs, he should not be getting 4 catches for 52 yards. You need your big-time players in big-time games. And as much as I do love Xavier Hutchinson, he's not that. So, yeah, I mean, I think you're right, Nu. It's a bit of a funny season for the Texans because, yeah, we got really far and we did objectively pretty well. Like, another playoff win. Okay, we lost to the Chiefs. Okay. But we are closer to, say, the Colts than we are to the Chiefs. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's that kind of level. Like to compete with the big boys, to compete with the Ravens, Bills, and Chiefs, you've got to be on your A game. Yeah, and we'll talk about these guys in a second as well, about being on your A game. So, yeah, kind of an ugly season for the Texans. Obviously, on the surface, it's quite successful, but I think it's bittersweet, I think, is how I would kind of sum it up for the Texans. It really is not as good as it seems on the surface.
Yeah, Dom, I completely agree. I think there needs to be some reworking in the off-season. And, we've seen teams like this who seem really promising burn out before. And there's no reason why the Texans should do that, but they just need to lock down the long-term players and find easy and cheap solutions to their problems.
Exactly. Well, no, the Chiefs, the team that beat the Texans.
It's always hard watching a Chiefs game to find out, what is the takeaway for the Chiefs, because it is always really hard, because, they always somehow block a field goal or exactly Fairbairn misses kicks. But what I'm going to say is that playoff experience matters and playoff experience shows. And you can see that with Chris Jones' domination and Travis Kelce having probably the best game of the season so far. Now, these are players who, this is any other Sunday to them. This is the Texans Super Bowl playing the Chiefs. This is just 2 games before the Super Bowl for all the other Chiefs players, for Mahomes, for Kelce. And it just showed, Dom, during the season, Travis Kelce averaged just under 8 yards per catch. This game, he had 2 catches for over 40. He makes big plays when the lights shine the brightest, and that is what terrifies, I think, every NFL fan. Is they know that when the Chiefs get into big games, that's when they play their best. Better than the regular season, better than any other time. And it's what's going to make the AFC Championship game next week absolutely amazing. But I think that's the only takeaway you can have from the Chiefs game.
Yeah, mine is very similar, which is the Chiefs season starts now.
Yeah.
Like, this has all been a walk in the park for them. They haven't even looked good. Even against the Texans, I think, they genuinely did not look that good. Like, that was a potentially winnable game. Again, if we had a perfect game, if we had all our weapons, I think it could have been a competition. But Mahomes is now leading the Chiefs to the 7th straight AFC Championship game appearance. How do you do that? 7 in a row. Like, he's never not been to the AFC Championship game as a starter. That's the flaw of this Chiefs team. That's the flaw of Patrick Mahomes, which is really mind-boggling. Like, they are 2 games away now, obviously the AFC Championship game win and a Super Bowl win, from, I think, being the best team of all time. Up there with like the 86 Bears or whatever people throw out those years. I don't care about old football, so I'm not the person to reference these kind of things. I don't care.
That's rage bait.
Those part-timers who are all like semi-professional, just boozing on the weekend. Don't talk to me about those guys. But like, the Chiefs have been so dominant for so long, and we've said it the whole season. Even when they look normal, they're going to the AFC Championship game. And you're right, Nu. Experience, talent, coaching, it rises to the top. And they're two wins away from the big one, from another Super Bowl win. And I tell you what, Nu, if I have to watch a Chiefs-Eagles Super Bowl again, I am going to scream, because no one wants that. Who do you support in that kind of scenario?
Just a draw, I guess, some sort of meteorological event that means it's cooled off. I'm not sure, but that would be awful, Dom. That would be absolutely horrible.
It'd be an absolute... be miserable. Right. Commanders-Lions, dude. Probably one of the biggest upsets we've seen this season, I would say. Like, in a season where there's been a lot of unexpected good teams and a lot of, like the 49ers, for example, a lot of teams and the Jets that have not lived up to their expectations, I don't think any team has either gone more above or more below their expectations than the Washington Commanders.
Yeah, Dom, if you told me at the start of the year that the Giants would win 3 games and that the Commanders and Eagles with Saquon Barkley would be in the NFC Championship game, I would have told you, I would think that's a nightmare. I would have woken up screaming and crying, and it's the reality, and I hate it. But outside of my bias, the Commanders, what a game. And absolutely what a game plan from Dan Quinn and Cliff Kingsbury. They really beat the Lions at their own game, really. They were doing trickery. Jaden Daniels looked amazing. And Dom, he's probably the best rookie quarterback of all time. I think you have to put him in that conversation. It's only him and Joe Flacco who've ever been to a championship game in their rookie season. I think Jaden Daniels is a better quarterback than Joe Flacco. And I don't know. I think the Commanders, I've been a hater since day one, and I think I still always will be a hater because I think they're playing above their means. But what a run they're having, Dom.
I mean, look, let's not have Andrew Luck erasure here. Like, I think there's definitely a conversation to be had about Jaden Daniels having one of the best ever rookie quarterback seasons. Don't get me wrong. But I think to crown it as the best this early, well, we might have a discussion about that in the offseason, Nu. But for me, with the Commanders, much like you said, Jaden Daniels is special. Like, is truly special. I was infamously low on Daniels. But you know what, Nu? Okay, so here's the thing, right? I've kind of been gaslit by Commanders fans for thinking that I hated Jaden Daniels and that I had no, I had him as like my 40th ranked player. I had him as my 10th ranked player. But what I've learned being reflective about my miss about Jaden Daniels, because I did miss. I didn't want him drafted second overall. I didn't want Drake May ahead of him, which I don't think is wrong in a vacuum at all. That's not kind of the argument that we're having here. But I had him as 10, and he should have been 2 or 3 or 1, maybe even. And what I've learned from that, I think, is that I got too caught up, first of all, in the hype that was surrounding him. I was more kind of trying to attack the hype, like you got Dan Orlovsky being like, I'd take him at 1, which, yeah, sure, now we know that might have been a great pick, but at the time, I feel like the evidence didn't suggest that, nor the tape didn't suggest that. But also, I just got too caught up in his weaknesses. I've realised now that a good offense, a good offensive coordinator, a good offensive system will hide a quarterback's weaknesses or limit them as much as possible and let the strengths shine. And with Jaden Daniels, that is completely the case. Do we see from time to time him take some crazy hit? Yeah. Do we see from time to time him holding onto the ball for a bit too long? Yeah, sure. Is his arm strength really good? No, I think his arm strength is pretty average, to be fair. But that's the point, is that in this offense, none of that matters. Like, yeah, his arm strength isn't that great, but his arm talent is amazing. Like, he can throw a deep ball, he can throw a fade down the sideline better than any quarterback in the league. It's a glorified handoff. He can throw a 40-yard fade down the sideline, outside the numbers, as well as me just plonking it in someone's lap. And that plays. And I just got too caught up in the weaknesses. But the fact that he can make plays with his legs and his arm is so valuable. He's a value add in the run game with the running back, but also himself as a runner. That opens up the pass game and vice versa. Like, we've spoken before about, does the run game affect the pass game, or does the pass game affect the run game? Really, it's both. It works both ways. It's a symbiotic relationship either way. And he's just been fantastic under pressure. That, I think, has been the biggest surprise for me. Like, this guy, when the blitz is coming, he can identify it, he can hang in the pocket, and he can just let that thing fly. And watching him against pressure, watching him against the Lions, just evading Brian Branch with his legs, or standing in there and throwing a dime to Terry McLaurin or De'Ami Brown, who's got his eyes being covered by a Lions DB. It's just something, you're right, Newt, that I've definitely not seen before. And he's having a special season, as are the Commanders as a whole.
Yeah, Dom, it's a tale as old as time, is focus on what people can do rather than what they can't do. Bill Belichick was not asking Tom Brady to run the speed option. And when Lamar came into the league, they weren't asking to be a pocket passer. And I think Cliff Kingsbury, despite all his flaws, has really played to his strengths.
Yeah.
Get the ball out quickly. Dom, amazing. That deep ball is one of the best, if not the best in the NFL. Reminds me a lot of prime Russell Wilson when he was with Seattle. There's lovely looping balls that just seem like they're never going to come down. When they do, they're always in the right spot. And they've just played to his strength perfectly. And it's all you can do as a coach.
Yeah, I agree. And what about the Lions then, Neil? What's your take on the Lions?
Poor Lions, man. I really do feel for Lions and Lions fans. The average price of a ticket for that game was just under $900, the most expensive game in Lions history. And I'm really worried for them, Dom. I think this really could be panic stations for the Lions and the Lions fans. And that's because of Ben Johnson and Aaron Glenn. So Ben Johnson, offensive coordinator, Aaron Glenn, defensive coordinator. So much is put on Dan Campbell because he's the culture leader. He's the guy who gets the headlines. But in terms of how the team actually plays, play by play, schematically, training wise, it's Aaron Glenn and Ben Johnson. And it's almost certain they are both going to leave this offseason. That is awful for the Lions. That is the worst case scenario. This was going to be your year, the year when you won the Super Bowl and you've fallen short. And your two, in my opinion, the two most important parts of your team, more important than Amon-Ra, more important than Aiden Hutchinson, are gone. And they're almost irreplaceable. Now, these are going to be the two hottest head coaching candidates this year. Who are you going to replace them with? And it is real cause for concern for the Lions and for the Lions fans.
I am in complete agreement, New. I've said that I'm worried the Super Bowl window for the Lions is over. I question if Jared Goff can win the big games. He was 23 completions of 40 attempts, 313 yards, 1 touchdown, 3 interceptions, and those 3 interceptions were ugly. 2 big-time throws, 4 turnover-worthy plays. He's not a creator out of structure. He's not someone that makes plays when the chips are down. He can't put the team on his back and lead like one of those Mahomes 15-second drives or a Josh Allen where he puts up 6 total touchdowns. And I think it was a fitting way for the game to end with him throwing an interception. I don't hold that one against him. You got to make something happen, do or die. Game was over anyway, so I'm not trying to hit him when he's down. And I don't hate Jared Goff at all. I think he's played very well in Detroit for the most part, but I just don't think that he has those high enough highs whereby unless you have a perfect season with a perfect run, almost like a kind of Nick Foles-esque, I think he's better than Nick Foles, don't get me wrong, but that kind of vibe, do you know what I mean? Like
Eli Manning would probably be a better one. Playing well
you need
above
everything to be perfect. Yeah, well, you just need everything to be perfect. And I agree. The Lions are in trouble this offseason massively. Dan Campbell's already said that he's preparing to lose both by the end of the week, in terms of Ben Johnson and Alec Glenn, that is. And I just think that we've seen already with teams like the Eagles when they lost Shane Steichen and Jonathan Gannon, and they're a better team, I think, than the Lions, that version of the Eagles. Like, I think Jalen Hurts is better than Goff, not by much actually, but I think he is better. And we saw that team take a massive step back, and really struggle. So it's such a shame because I think that we saw the biggest plays in this game didn't come from Jared Goff, didn't come from a specific player. It came from Ben Johnson. Him scheming open Jameson Williams on the end around. The Alwyn Ross and Brown toss, when the running, he pitches it back to the running back and the running back tosses it forward. They are Ben Johnson. He's not on the field, but he might as well be. He's the biggest player. He's the MVP of that offense. So yeah, I think the Lions are in some real trouble. Dan Campbell, like you say, Nu, is a great culture builder, and he's done so much for that team. But he's not an X's and O's guy. He's not a Kyle Shanahan. He's not a Sean McVay. He's not a Bill Belichick defensively. So he's got to hire two cracking offensive and defensive coordinators. And then even if they're amazing, the Lions are right back here again when they're going to get hired by other teams as head coaches, which is the downside of having a culture builder head coach, because you don't even get to keep one kind of continuity on one side of the ball. Players have got to learn new kind of defensive scheme and offensive schemes. But I'll end it with this, Nu. I also think, as one saving grace for Lions fans, Jahmyr Gibbs is insane. Yeah. He is so good. Like that play where he cut up into the scrum and then cut straight laterally out left and had a massive chunk play. Like, he is really, really good. And I know they kind of thrive off the 50-50 with Montgomery and Gibbs. I'd give Gibbs more handoffs, man. Like, if they kept going to him and were able to keep going to him, if the defense held in, then they could have maybe kept themselves in the game, but they didn't. And the Lions are out of there. And you know what's crazy? The NFC North had combined what? Well, the NFC North playoff teams. So it was 14-15 or 14-14 for the. How many wins did the Lions have this season?
15, and the Vikings had 14, I think.
So 15-14, so that's 29, and then the Packers had 10?
Yeah, they went, the Chicago Bears, the best record in 2025. But
they came into this playoffs with the most combined wins of any division ever, and they didn't win a single playoff game.
It shows the difference that being a good regular season team and being a good playoff team are two different things. And I think the Eagles are actually a perfect example of that, which we'll talk about very soon.
Well, let's go on to them right now, Nu. Rams, Eagles. What's your take on the Eagles?
So my take on the Eagles, Dom, is that Jalen Hurts is a non-factor for this team's success. And, even his big plays were built off of Saquon Barkley. They're read options when the Rams defense had to commit to Saquon because he's unreal. And easy play action read option touchdown. Their defense forced 7 sacks. And obviously the snow was a big factor, but their defense and Saquon Barkley single-handedly run this game. That is the entire team for the Eagles. And it works in playoff time. It works in cold weather. It works when the game's close. But the one thing I'm worried about is if the Eagles are behind and Jalen Hurts has to use his arm, what can they do? Because I don't think that's going to work. No matter how good their receivers are, I think he's just a more athletic Jared Goff. He's not going to make plus plays with his arms. He can make plus plays with his legs. But especially against an AFC team, if they do make it to the Super Bowl, if you can shut down Lamar Jackson, you can shut down Jalen Hurts.
Yeah, we're in complete alignment here. I've said Saquon Barkley is a different gravy, but Jalen Hurts and Jake Elliott are going to have to be asked to make a game-winning play at some point, and I question if either of them can do that. Saquon Barkley, legacy game, right? Legacy game. He will, if he has another season like this, he'll be a kind of a first ballot Hall of Famer for the Eagles, right? Which is just absolutely crazy. That break off touchdown with the snow on the field, him rushing down the sidelines, Eagles fans at the link going absolutely insane, and he had multiple of those runs in this game.
Two
He's
big
just
ones.
insane. But you're right, Nu. Jalen Hurts holding onto the ball for way too long, inviting pressure, terrible pocket presence, not throwing the ball away. Like the safety, throw the ball away, Jalen. Like that was what put the Rams back in this game. Like, was that 2 points and an extra possession as well? Like, it was really ugly watching that and watching Jalen Hurts just struggle in the passing game. And Jake Elliott as well. What has happened to him? Talking about kickers having a fall off. Like, it's got to the point now with Jake Elliott where even an extra point, you're sat there being like, is he gonna make this one? And when you're going into the playoffs where there's almost definitely at some point going to be either a half or, even worse, a whole game where it comes down to you're in field goal range. Can you get a 47-yarder in the cold, walk-off win?
No, he can't.
I wouldn't trust him to do that. Yeah, sure, at the end of the game, he did make those kind of kicks, but as a kicker, like, you need to be on your A game because it comes down to literally one play for you. And at the moment for Jake Elliott, it feels like a coin toss, which is really ugly. And Jalen Hurts, like, I really like that comparison between Jalen Hurts and Jared Goff. And I kind of agree. As I was saying before, like, when I was talking about Jared Goff, I was like, oh, he is, Jalen Hurts is better than Jared Goff, but not by much. Like, they are very similar quarterbacks in that sense that they are, but if you take out Jalen Hurts' legs, which is a massive part of his game, don't get me wrong. Like, I respect that is what really does elevate him above a Jared Goff, for example, because he does have that. But as a passer, like you say, when the chips are down and you have to pass, can he do it? I really don't think so. But what I also want to say is that this kind of links also to the Commanders and the Lions, is that the floor of your team is set by the offensive and defensive lines, and the ceiling is set by your quarterback. So obviously, the floor of the Eagles is amazing because I think they have the best offensive and defensive line combination in the league and have done, it feels like, for the last 5 years. But the ceiling of the team is not that high. So when we're looking at them matching up against the Commanders, who, probably have a lower floor because of their offensive and defensive lines, which don't hold a candle to the Eagles'. But they have Jalen Hurts. They have Jaden Daniels, who is a difference maker at quarterback, and Jalen Hurts fundamentally isn't that. So that's going to be a really interesting game, kind of like high floor versus high ceiling almost. That variance is going to be interesting.
It's almost, past versus the future in terms of what NFL offensive systems look like. The Eagles play classic football. You grind down the clock, run heavy, dominate teams. Almost like Jim Harbaugh style of playing football. Whereas the Commanders are let it fly, screen game is extension of the run game, deep ball, let's put it in our young rookies' hands. And it's going to be a really interesting stylistic matchup because I think simultaneously they work a great matchup and also terribly against each other because they're so different. And even though in my heart of hearts, I'd love both teams to lose as a Giants fan, it will be great watching.
It will, and I also just want to shout out Nolan Smith. He has been unreal. Well. Again, just like I said it last episode, Howie Roseman, like, it's a boring meme and it's become like almost a cliche, but landing that guy at pick 29 or something, like he looks so good, and he's a lighter edge rusher who plays so much heavier than he is. And as I said, if the floor is being set by the offensive and defensive line, you've got Nolan Smith, you've got Jalen Carter, you've got Jordan Davis. I think the Commanders are going to struggle against that defensive line. So then the Rams, what's your take on the Rams?
The Rams, I guess, is sort of don't worry. You did much better than I think everyone was expecting you to do this season. All the media narrative was like you sold your soul to win the Super Bowl. You took all the way, you sold all your first round picks, all your draft capital. After your Super Bowl window closes, you're going to be done. And what they've done is drafted amazingly and have great coaching. That defensive line, sorry, I need to correct myself earlier. The Rams had 7 sacks, not the Eagles, although the Eagles' defensive line was great. They had 7 sacks on an amazing offensive line. Jordan Mailata, Lane Johnson, those are probably the 2 best tackles in the NFL.
Yeah.
And
it's the best offensive line by a country mile.
And Braden Fisk and Jared Verse, rookies, made them look like children. They were men playing on that field, and it was absolutely sensational to see. And I think there's a lot of future with this team. Obviously they've got an aging quarterback with Matt Stafford, and that is an important thing they need to sort of keep an eye on. But he's still playing, I think, at an elite level. He almost won this game driving them down the field. If it wasn't for the snow, I think we were talking about the Rams in the NFC Championship game right now. So for the Rams, obviously it's a disappointing loss. It's a tough pill to swallow, but I think you're going to be back. Because I think you've built a team very similar to the Eagles with a lot of future and a lot of promise.
Yeah, I mean, what I've said is Jared Verse is going to be a star, and the Rams have replaced Aaron Donald in the aggregate. Like, they had 16 team sacks in the playoffs, which was 3 shy of the record, and they only played in 2 games. They had 9 and 8. Like, Jared Verse ran over Mekhi Becton, who is 6'7", 360 pounds. And he's just insane. He's insane. And the young defense that the Rams have built, I think the rest of the defense needs it. Like, I mean, having those linebackers got bullied in the run game against Saquon Barkley, like Rose Boom and whoever else the other one is, like, that's not good enough. But the defensive line, Byron Young, Jared Verse, Braden Fisk, like, that is how you replace one of the best, well, I think the best defensive player of all time, one of the best players all time, full stop, because that defensive line is absolutely dominant, and it kind of manhandled the best offensive line in the league, and it was so impressive. I mean, for me, the play where the Saquon Barkley breakoff run down the right side, not the one that was like properly snowing yet.
I have to differentiate between the two, just shows how good he is.
I know, he's insane. But Jared Verse hit 21.48 miles per hour at 260 pounds.
Chasing
down Saquon. What the hell is that? Put that guy at like tight end for a couple snaps. Just have him hit the top of a defense. Like, I want to see that. Like, he is so physical, so powerful, an amazing player. And, I think there's questions around what's going to happen with Matthew Stafford, but, the Rams have a very good young core with Puka Nacua, Kyron Williams, Jared Verse, Byron Young, etc., etc. So they need to find a Stafford replacement probably in this year, next year. But look, the Rams are a good team, well coached, and I think their floor is pretty high, as I was saying, with that defensive line.
Also, I hate to take a shot at the Raiders when they're not even in the video, but have you seen how they drafted the wrong Byron Young?
I did see that.
I think that is absolutely hilarious, and how the Byron Young for the Rams is a superstar, and the Byron Young I don't even think he even plays on the Raiders.
He's not on the team. He's not on the team.
Just barely has a career statistic. I think that is so classic Raiders, and Ben Johnson, stay away from there. I've seen him linked there, but that was just, sorry, a quick aside.
I believe that. To be the truth.
Yeah, 100%.
Like, I don't think that's a coincidence, because apparently they called the Rams Byron Young before their pick. He answered the phone and was like, we're going to draft you here. And then they drafted the other one. So crazy. But then finally, the big one. Ravens, Bills. Bills pull off the win. They advance. Ravens go home. What's your take on the Ravens?
Sorry, Dom, just having a few technical issues here. All good, sorry. My take on the Ravens, it's unlucky. It's just so unlucky. And I don't know what they're missing, Dom. They've always come
Not turning the ball over?
They've always come so close, but so far. Obviously, a lot of the blame can be put on Mark Andrews. He had 2 pretty bad plays, but I think that's unfair to blame it on a mistake that is not fundamental to the team. It was clearly Lamar's first pick, miscommunication. Mark Andrews fumbles, bad ball security. Those turnovers did lose in the game, of course. But in terms of the greater scheme of things, I think it's quite disheartening for Ravens fans, because I don't think your team can get better than it is. And they still can't get through the best in the AFC. So I think the big thing was turnovers today in the game yesterday rather. But they were a catch away from tying the game up and sending it to overtime, and the narrative of this game would be very different. So yeah, I'm not sure what my takeaway is actually, Dom. Did you have one?
I said that turnovers killed the Ravens, which Lamar was definitely partly responsible for, but that it's not Lamar's fault. I was really worried, and I kind of knew that depending on who won or lost the game, the losing quarterback would be crowned a fraud, and they can't get it done, and even in the best season they've ever had, they still can't win the big one, which is such a shame, because that's not really what it should come down to. For me, I think multiple things should be true at once here, Noom. For the past 3 seasons, Lamar Jackson has played at an MVP level and is clearly one of the top 3 quarterbacks in the league. But his postseason resume is lacking comparatively. Yeah, it's a smaller sample size, only 8 games. But he's like 3 and 5?
3 and 5 in the postseason.
And you're right to point out that if Andrew catches that pass, we're going to be talking about a great Ravens comeback and potentially them winning the game, and then that changes the narrative completely. So I think for your argument to be, well, Lamar can't get it done in January versus, oh my God, Lamar upset the Bills at home and is now playing in the AFC Championship against the Chiefs, who they would be favorited against most likely, even at Arrowhead, if the difference between those two things is Mark Andrews not dropping a dolly for a 2-point conversion, then I don't think that argument holds a lot of water, frankly. So it's really tough for the Ravens, because the bottom line, really, if we're looking at it just black and white, you can't go into January postseason football and play the worst game of your season, which is objectively what Lamar Jackson did in this game. They lost the turnover battle 3-0, and you can't expect to win a game like that. But it's a very unforgiving time of year. You lose one game, you are out. Like, you are done, and everyone is watching you. You don't get to have a do-over. It's not week 15. You can't look up at the scoreboard and think, oh, we got another one next week, let's roll on. This is your season. And I'm not really buying the whole Lamar can't get it done in January narrative. I know that's going to be peddled now for the whole off-season, but I will take the 3 seasons of MVP level and accept that, he hasn't been able to get it done in the postseason. I'm not going to make excuses for that. It is on him, partly. But I'm not going to press the red button and go panic mode and go, Lamar, can Lamar ever win the big one? I think he's got the talent, and I'm banking on the bigger sample size.
Yeah, Dom, I completely agree. The fact there's one play difference between winning and losing. And the second half, the Ravens were unstoppable. For especially in that third quarter, I think the Bills only had like 3 or 4 yards of total offense, maybe 1 or 2 first downs. And the Ravens look like the old-fashioned Ravens, but you're completely right on. You have to play your best. All you have to do is your best. You can't have a bad game. You can't make silly mistakes. You can't have miscommunications, and you can't have drops. And it's what the Ravens had. And I think it's very, very close to having a different conversation now, if things were to go well. But, I completely agreed on Lamar is still an elite quarterback. If you're like, wins is a quarterback stat, he's never been to the Super Bowl, therefore he's not elite, I think you're
get in the bin.
You're an idiot who doesn't watch the games. It's fundamental.
Learn ball.
Get some ball knowledge, and then come chat to me. But
don't talk to me yet.
So unfortunate for the Ravens, unfortunate for Ravens fans, unfortunate for our good friend Dan Light. But what can you do?
It is. I mean, and then flipping into the Bills there, they got out past yards. So they had less passing yards, they had less rushing yards, they had less yards per play, but they just played a cleaner game. It was a very odd game from the Bills, who I really don't think played particularly well. And even when they had a turnover margin of 3-0, they still only won the game by 2 points at home. So I didn't have any kind of confident takeaways in terms of the Bills game, but I would say that it was quite refreshing that it didn't have to rely on Josh Allen heroics and it coming down to 3rd and 27 and him making some insane play. I'm quite glad they just managed to play a clean game, which is what you have to play in the playoffs. And frankly, what they're going to have to play away at Arrowhead next weekend, which is, if you turn the ball over, if you give Patrick Mahomes another possession at any time in the game, you are shooting yourself in the foot. So whilst I wasn't blown away by the Bills' performance, it definitely wasn't a classic Bills performance, quote unquote. And I was a little bit uninspired by some quite conservative play calling, going for a field goal from the 2-yard line, I think, instead of going for a touchdown. I think I want to see them play a bit more aggressively, not Josh Allen, but just fundamentally from the coaching down. I want to see them play more aggressively against the Chiefs, because you've got to take your chances while you have them. You might not be in the red zone again at the 2-yard line, so you've got to go for those. When you've got Josh Allen, run QB power. I don't care what you run, but you've got to get in the end zone there. So
Dom, so I completely agree with the Bills thing, and I actually would go a bit further, Dom, because I don't think the takeaway should be they played a clean, good game. Because like you said, that field goal opportunity, they were 3rd and 1, 3rd and 2 maybe, on the goal line, and they decided to run a read option QB power out of shotgun instead of making your 6'6" quarterback QB sneak for 2 consecutive plays. Josh Allen had less than 150 pass yards this game. I think the Bills need to play like the Bills to beat the Chiefs. You can't play this conservative style of putting the ball in the hands of James Cook. He's a good player. He's not the MVP of the league. To beat the best, you have to be the best. And they were nowhere near the best. To beat someone who's 16-3 in the postseason in Patrick Mahomes, you can't just run the ball and hope they make mistakes. I have a big issue with the game. That's why I am very sympathetic to the Ravens, because I think the Bills should have lost that game. After their play calling towards the end, they lost it. They got clearly a bit too nervous, and it just was not good enough. And I'm really not hopeful for them next week. If that's a similar game plan, it won't go well.
Well, we will be back this time next week reviewing the AFC and NFC championship games. But before then, we actually are going to this week be dropping a post-divisional round mock draft, which the fans love. We love doing. It'll be the first one that I've done with you for quite a while now because you've been dossing. So I'll have you back to do an alternating one, and I'll be interested to hear your takes on that when we do it. So make sure you're subscribed because that is going to be dropping either like Thursday, Friday, some point. If you're not already, make sure to subscribe. Leave a comment if you agree or disagree with either me or Noob, but we've had bulletproof takes, so I don't know if you can actually do that. But I've been your host, Dom Corbs. That's my co-host, Nick Corbs. We've been Unsportsmanlike Conduct. We'll see you on the next one.
See ya.